Ukraine is holding fast against Russian advances, but even Kiev admits they can't hold out for much longer. And is the aid package seeing some light at the end of the tunnel as Speaker Johnson tries to move it through the House? Just what exactly is the plan going forward? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about all of it. Okay, so first off, let's talk about the state of the front line. And I've not really talked extensively about what things are looking like on the front line because, frankly, Ukraine, since it's pivoted to this defensive effort, has really been effective at stopping the Russians, at least along key axes of advance. Now, you can see here this Berdichi or Livka Umansky line, right? This river here that we've talked about for the better part of a month and a half that has become a Ukrainian barrier, right? This is well-chosen terrain by Syrskyi, and it has held pretty effectively. But the Russians are trying to go around it, right? They're trying to get any kind of foothold through this river canal system. And it seems like they tried to go south here near Umansky, but you can see that the river itself bends south. So the Russians still unable to cross. Now it looks like they're trying to go north near Berdichi. You could see over the last 2 days, they've made some minor advances, but again, only up to this field here. But you can see this is where this river canal system terminates. And Ukrainian forces, this is the northern anchor of their line. And Russia's goal, honestly, is going to probably be to punch through here near Novobotmutivka and then turn south, right? This is the classic maneuver, something that even a Civil War general, a U.S. Civil War general, would find very familiar, right? Get to the flank of your opponent's line and turn them, forcing the line to collapse, negating the defensive effects of this obstacle, in this case, a river and hill. But easier said than done, right? Ukrainian forces, again, able to deploy their remaining resources where necessary. And this is one of those key necessary points. But that said, when you look on the map, you can see Russia is pushing just about everywhere. Robtina, Krasnohorivka, Ivanevsky, Novokalyonivka, and Bolanivka. So a huge front line spanning continued pressure by Russian forces. And that seems to be what this is. There isn't a particularly massive Russian push in any one direction. In fact, most Ukrainians or sources are reporting that they expect a real Russian offensive to come in the summer. As we've looked at, right, the conditions right now, very muddy, not really conducive to mechanized assaults. But Russia just doesn't want to give Ukrainians a chance to rest and refit. They want to keep the pressure on them because Russia believes it's going to be able to equip its forces by summer. Its forces are going to be stronger, whereas the Ukrainians, they think, are going to be much weaker, right? They're going to have fewer munitions. They're not going to be able to get the new batch of conscripts trained up in time, right? They only just now passed the conscription law that would enable them to put more troops on the front lines. But by a lot of accounts, the troops that are going to the front lines are of a much lower quality, right? The volunteers are still worth way more that, obviously someone who wants to be in the fight is going to fight harder than someone who doesn't even want to be there. But the other truth that Ukraine is publicly acknowledging is that Russia hasn't just stepped up its ground assaults. They've also stepped up their missile and drone strikes against Ukrainian infrastructure, right? Launching up to 20 cruise missiles, several Kinzhal, what they call aeroballistics. I think those are the hypersonic missiles. And a number of other cruise missiles, as well as up to 40 Shahed drones, right? This is a large volley, and Russia's leaning more heavily on these. They generally target Ukrainian infrastructure and population centers. The reason Russia is using these is because Ukraine has very publicly said that they are running very low on crucial Patriot air defense batteries, which protect Ukrainian cities and frontline areas. But also are effective against a lot of modern Russian weapon systems that the Ukrainian Soviet-era air defense systems, like the S-300s, just cannot hit, right? So there's some things that only the Patriot can do. And the fact is that without Patriot missiles and additional Patriot batteries, Ukraine is not going to be able, it's going to have to make tough choices. And the talks about this, that Ukraine, let's see if we can find it here, that Ukraine has to make these really hard choices in terms of whether or not to defend its population centers or protect its troops on the front line from Russian air attacks. And these sort of tough trade-offs are bad. I don't know what else to tell you. It's a sign that Ukraine's ability to sustain the fight in the long term without additional aid is very limited. Guys, if you're interested in getting the boost of energy you need, you want to check out Strike Gum, right? Strike Gum, my gum. I developed it in conjunction with the guys at Liquid Core, and this is everything that I wish I had when I was deployed to Afghanistan, right? I didn't have caffeine gum. I had to rely on these energy drinks. They were super gross. They were called Rippets. They were disgusting. They were really inconvenient. I had to carry literally a can sloshing around in my cargo pocket while I was on patrol, right? This solves all those problems. 90 milligrams of caffeine in every single piece. That's as much as a Red Bull. And 0 sugar, 100 milligrams of alpha GPC for additional cognitive clarity. And we use only natural caffeine. This is caffeine that's derived directly from green coffee beans. It's not what they call encapsulated. Encapsulated caffeine is like that. You've probably had it, right? You probably don't know you had it, but it is just a way less effective caffeine source, right? Where you've had that energy drink and you've drank it and you said, man, I thought this was going to give me energy, and it just sort of underwhelms you. That's because the caffeine content is all or partially this encapsulated, artificial caffeine. We don't use that. It's too small. The only way to give this the effect that I want it to is to use natural caffeine in this thing. So check us out at strikegum.com, or we're on Amazon, right? So you can just go to Amazon, search Strike Gum or Strike Gum Energy, and you'll see it. Thanks to the dozens of people that have left us 5-star reviews, you know that is a difference maker here for any Amazon seller. So thank you guys so much. Now let's talk about Washington, D.C., right? The hive of scum and villainy. House Speaker Mike Johnson is pulling out all the stops and negotiating even with the White House to advance Ukrainian aid, right? He's trying to advance wartime funding. Now there's a lot of obstacles. And one is linking Ukraine and Israel funding. Now, here's the thing, guys. My personal opinion is, right, like Ukraine is fighting an existential war for its survival, and Israel is, by most accounts, bombing a heavily civilian area that is, and the primary people they are fighting are using like homemade weapons, right? So Israel doesn't really need more aid. That said, the problem with Israel, because it's so one-sided, whether Israel has 10 planes or 1 million, they're going to be doing the same things, right? Like the quantity of munitions is not the thing that is restricting Israeli behavior towards civilians. And there's been a lot of videos. And again, my gripe is not that Israel is going after Hamas. My gripe is that they're going after Hamas in a way that jeopardizes civilian lives at a way beyond anything the United States would do. So I share the concerns of largely Democrats, though some Republicans, about providing additional funds to the Israeli effort. That said, the provision of additional funds is probably not going to impact this. It's probably not going to impact the outcome of the conflict there. And so this, to me, it's just illustrative of the problems inherent to this, right? So you've already linked a popular measure, aid to Ukraine, with a deeply unpopular one, aid to Israel, right? And that's just the start of Speaker Johnson's problems, right? And so the hard-line Republicans, led by Marjorie Taylor Greene, have basically said that they are going to go after Johnson's job if he passes Ukraine aid. Why are these hard-line Republicans so incredibly irate at providing aid to Ukrainians? It's not really clear. They've never really explained it beyond it's a lot of money, which when you look at the total U.S. defense budget, it's a tiny amount of money. It's like something like 5% of it. So it's tough to know what the real reason is. But Johnson is still doing his best. He's talking not just to the White House, to try to get assurances that his job will be protected by Democrats if he moves this legislation through the House, right? Because that's who he's going to need to help him. But he also needs to talk with Republican nominee Donald Trump, who, because he is so popular with the Republican base, if Trump comes out against an aid package, it will functionally kill it, right? Because so many Republican members of the House cannot break with Trump or else they will lose their reelection. So that itself is another conflict. So he has to navigate, literally get the green light for this through two presidential candidates. And here's the other thing. I've seen a number of posts that blame Johnson exclusively for delaying this aid. And that it was correct like a month and a half ago. In February, that was correct. Johnson was single-handedly responsible for this. But now he seems to have come around. And now he is trying to get this pushed through, admittedly with a bunch of favorable terms to himself, as we've talked about. It includes the opening of a large liquid natural gas port in his home state of Louisiana, something that the gas company has been lobbying for 6 to 8 months. So, he's going to get his, but he is trying to move this through in a way that doesn't cost him his job, right? And it's not clear that Trump will lend actual support to this package, but he is hoping that Trump will just be quiet for a little bit. Just be quiet for like 6 weeks while this thing moves through. That said, it is really, really hard. And despite the fact that a lot of House Republicans acknowledge, Representative Don Bacon, a Republican, said, quote, "This becomes a more dangerous world with Russia in Kiev." He added, so, quote, "We're just trying to find the smart way to get a bill passed that we can get out and back to the Senate." Right. And even House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries acknowledged that, quote, "The only path forward for the House was a vote on the Senate's national security package." And he also suggested that Democrats would help Johnson hold on to the speaker's gavel if he did so. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it requires, it's a windy tunnel. Now, what can you do to help? Of course, I always talk about this every video, but because it's true, you can write to your congressman, right? It takes Democrats and Republicans to work together on this, and everybody can do something. If your district is a hardline Democrat, you could sit there and say, listen, Ukraine aid's important, so I need you to just hold off. This is not the vehicle to express your reservations around Israeli treatment of Palestinians. Just try to move this thing through. If you're a hardline Democrat, you can say, listen, or a hardline Republican, you can tell them, listen, don't fight on this. Get some version of Ukraine aid through. It's important, right? And if you're in the moderate, you can say, listen, tell Speaker Johnson, anyone in the center, that you will let them hold on to his job if he can move this thing through. So you guys can do it as voters, right? And I put a link in the description how to contact your representative, and you should do it. In fact, here, comment down below with your message. Don't make it mean. Don't be abusive. Don't be a jerk. But I'll pick a couple of the messages, right? Just tell me who you wrote to, who your representative is, and then what your message was. And, again, don't be mean, don't be abusive. But if you throw a nice pun in there, I'll pick a couple and we'll read them out in the next video. So comment down below with what you sent to your rep and, advocating for the passage of Ukraine assistance. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you so much to the Colonel tier members of combatvetnews.com. The Lieutenant tier members, I couldn't do this without you guys, really. We just dropped a video yesterday. Totally worth it. And thank you guys for your support, and I'll see you over there. Cheers.